Wrestling towards the line, Jack O'Neill! Doesn't come, and O'Neill's gone for the field goal! Bat it back, O'Neill! Challenge check, cut out pass to O'Neill! O'Neill goes in!
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack O'Neill. Welcome to the Be The Player podcast. This is going to be our pilot episode. Of course, this has been hyped up a little bit in the SRL Discord. I'm really excited to get this podcast underway. It's going to be, a little kind of like the pilot episode of a good TV show. Like, no TV show's first episode realistically is ever the best. So we're going to keep adding, we're going to keep on building until the end of the season. We're going to have heaps of stuff going on in this podcast. I'm really, really excited to get into it. So for all of those guys who are new to the SRL Discord, or to the community who don't know who I am, my name is Jack O'Neill. I've been a player in the SRL since Season 1. I was one of the first to sign up. I played 1 year for South Sydney before I moved to Canberra, and I've played my last 2 seasons there, including this one. It's been a really good ride so far with both clubs. The Raiders, we had a bit of a shaky start to the season, but we're starting to play some decent footy now, so hopefully we can refresh over this break and come back bigger and better than ever. I'm, of course, also involved with the New South Wales Origin side. I'm a part of their leadership group, so I can give a lot of insight into our thinking, especially after Wednesday, which was not great. So we can get into all that shortly, but things that you can expect from me on this podcast, of course, I've got a couple of cool little segments that I'm going to bring in the next few weeks. The first one is Saints and Sinners. So each week I'm going to name my saint. So something about the week could be anything. Anything that comes to mind that, really stood out to me that I thought, that was really awesome. That was really good to see. That will be my saint, whether it's a really good performance by an individual player, an individual team, or a really good moment, really good act of sportsmanship, or something like that. Just something that catches my eye. And now the sinner, of course, it's something that I don't like, something that rubs me the wrong way, whether it's a poor performance or it's misconduct or something like that. So that's a segment I'm really excited to bring to you guys. I think that it's going to be good, a good little segment there. Now, of course, we've got the normal sort of rugby league, even just sport segments, our round review, our round preview, where we'll of course give you all of our player matchups, our team of the week, and all that type of stuff. But these are the big ones that I want to start bringing in the next few weeks: interviews and competitions. We'll start off with interviews. So I want to be able to get some of you guys in on this podcast with me, 5 to 10 minute chats, or you guys could even jump on and co-host with me for however long the podcast go for. I don't really know how long they're going to go, to be honest. I've got a lot of notes at the moment. Could go for half an hour, could go for an hour, could go for 3 hours. So, if you're interested in being a part of that, definitely shoot me a DM. That'll be awesome. As for competitions, of course, this is an official SRL podcast, meaning I've got the full support of the other members of the SRL Commission. So, these competitions can be anything, whether it's a commentary challenge, a fan hub challenge, any type of challenge, a submission. You could submit me your best rugby league life 4 tries, whatever, and then you'll get some sort of award from the SRL Power Up shop, whether that's a likeness upgrade, a tattoo, headgear, whatever you want to see. Of course, I need ideas for these because I want to change the competition each and every week. So I want you guys to flood me in DMs or even in the SRL chat, general chat, wherever, just some good ideas for challenges and for competitions and stuff like that. So, I want to make this podcast really interaction. I want to really encourage interactions between the fans and me and just you guys as well. So I want to see really good discussions in the comments as well. So that's really, I want to have a lot of discussion points coming out of these podcasts. You see the best NRL and SRL shows, always when you leave the show, there's still so much to talk about. Like, it's so hard to cover everything. And that's the beauty of the great sport of rugby league. So that's sort of the housekeeping. That's what you can expect from this podcast. Without further ado, let's get right into our State of Origin Game 1 review and Game 2 preview. Yes, so Pretty disappointing performance for my Blues. We, of course, went down 10-6 to the Queensland Maroons. There was one try apiece, but the Maroons did kick 2 penalty goals. It was not one of those performances where we didn't put in our best performance. Like, let's face it, there were a lot of players that let down the jersey that night. You know, the scoreline was, I wouldn't say flattering, but for a team to go out and put a performance on like that with silly missed tackles, silly errors, especially that last 10 minutes. I mean, Queensland definitely let us off the hook a few times in that last 10 minutes, but we just weren't good enough. There were players that came on and didn't get involved. We had a lot of debutants, and unfortunately, it just didn't go our way. Queensland were amazing, though. With that being said, they tackled their hearts out. There wasn't any player with more than 4 missed tackles, which, you know, is a pretty good strike rate to have. Of course, New South Wales had not many players without 4 as well, but they had a couple of players on 4, so it was pretty disappointing. Queensland Edge's defence was phenomenal. They were just showing up for each other all the time, and, you know, it was a sight to see. It was just a typical Queensland performance. Every single Origin series in any form of rugby league, I feel like someone is always saying it was just a typical Queensland performance, because it was. They just hung in there and did what they had to do. You know, New South Wales structure just did not trouble Queensland at all. It wasn't until they played a bit off the cuff and Kane Chapman-Kenny cruised in off a couple offloads. So, really disappointing stuff. But we're going to get into our review now. And one thing I want to talk about a little bit. Ash Crutcher, obviously on debut. Brody Kennedy, obviously on debut. So, I took most of the playmaking. I was the chief playmaker of that game. Ash, he didn't really get involved in that first half. We'll have a look at his stats here while I'm talking. And yeah, he had 58 minutes, 11 runs, 58 run meters, 14 tackles, no misses. That's a really good effort from him. He only had 2 kicks and an error as well. He gave away a penalty. So, you know, I think it was tough on Ash, and I think that in the New South Wales leadership group, we should have given him that full 80 minutes to just build into that game and keep building and feel that, instead of coming off and coming back on, because he played the first 40. Then Kennedy came on at halfback, and I think that was definitely on our part, just pushing really hard to get Brody into the squad somewhere, to get him just get him on. We didn't know where to put him on. Like, we could have brought him on anywhere, but we chose the halves. We thought that that's where he could have got some ball as well, because you bring him on the wing or in the centres, realistically, he's probably not going to get that much ball. We wanted Kennedy fresh and with possession, so that was sort of our thinking around that, but I don't think that that was the right decision by us. We should have let Ash play those 80 minutes. It's really easy with hindsight to say that, but I genuinely believe we should have let Ash play the 80 minutes, and, you know, if Brody was going to be on that bench, we should have given him a different role, whether that was coming on in the centres or on the wing, maybe playing in the middle, but as like a roaming ball player type of player, but unfortunately it didn't go that way. Let's talk about Queensland though. Isaac Edwards, what a performance. That was one of the best SRL State of Origin performances I've seen, not just from a half, but by any player. I had a real running battle with Isaac. Obviously the two, we both took over as the chief playmakers. We had halves that hadn't really experienced big-time footy before. Kyle Lewis, obviously a premiership winner with Manly, don't get me wrong, but he was a rookie last season, so he hadn't played. He's still young in his career, whereas me and Isaac have been around a bit longer. But Isaac, man, 272 kick meters from 7 kicks, real good knock. He had 88 run meters. He made 6 tackles, missed 3, so his defence, he left a bit to be desired there, but it was his game management, his kicking that just killed us, unfortunately. He had so much possession. He ran the ball 26 times. He had 26 runs of the football. He was so great. And, you know, you look at my kicking stats, where I ran for 125 metres off 38 runs, so I was probably a bit too dominant as well in that game, I will admit. 6 tackles with 2 misses. We have very similar stats, right? 270 kick meters. But the difference was, his kicks were always finding grass. They were always turning the back 3 around. They were always catching it not square with the defensive line, if that makes sense. They were actually turning around to have to catch it to try and get there on the full, because it was always going over their heads. So his kicking was always just that extra little bit better. So, he was always finding grass. Chaz Dingo, maybe his fullback placement probably wasn't where it was supposed to be, but he was still New South Wales' best or second best player that night. But he was just turning him around and giving him no room to wind up. He basically shut down. Chaz still ran for 255 metres, but he took a lot of oomph out of him, and that was really impressive. So congratulations to Isaac. He's really put his name forward now. Of course, last season, when I was doing my newsletter, the two guys that I was talking about as the top halves in the competition, Liam Ryan, who's now fullback, and James Thorne, who is now struggling a fair bit at Penrith. Isaac Edwards, by the end of this year, could be seen as the best half in the game if he keeps building on performances like tonight. He's had a pretty solid season for South Sydney. He's sort of flown under the radar. I really haven't heard anyone talking about Isaac, and that's just a credit to Edwards. He's got 2 more games now to really prove that he is a big game player and a big game performer, and build that into South Sydney's season. So that's pretty awesome to see for Isaac. Congratulations to him. And now the other thing I want to talk about before we talk about our top performance of the game, Jesse Bennett. Right, he's probably the form forward in the competition right now. I think that's fair to say. But he did struggle in this game moving into rep footy. He played for the Aussies, I think, in the Anzac Test earlier this year, and he played really well. So, I don't know, Origin is obviously a different beast altogether, but he started in the front row and he ran for 93 metres from 9 runs. He made 8 tackles, no misses, broke the line once, but other than that, no other stats. He didn't make any errors, which was good to see. So he was safe, he was consistent, but I do think the game got away from him there. I hope that we maybe find another way that we can bring him into the game. We're looking at a few different things. We're of course going to go through the 2 lineups in a moment. But I think that Jesse just needs a bit more of I hope his confidence isn't down too much, because we've got 2 games left to go and he is one of the best forwards in the game. I think he'll bounce back. I don't think there's any doubt of that. Now we're going to talk about the 2 top performers, for each side. For Queensland, I already spoke about him. Isaac Edwards, what a performance, what a knock from a real underrated half in the game. I think that now he's got, like I said, ample opportunity to prove that he's the best. I'm sure that's what he wants to be. He wouldn't say that. I feel like he's a pretty humble dude, but I think he knows. I think that's his goal, to be the best half in the game, as is all halves. And Joey Kelly, his stats probably aren't going to do him justice. Well, I mean, he did run for 198 metres from 14 runs, but he made 7 tackles and missed 2. So the 2 missed tackles isn't great, but he still made 7 tackles and 7 line breaks, which is huge. But it's what I wanted to talk about was how well he shut down Kane Chapman-Kenny. Kane Chapman-Kenny is one of the most dangerous players in the game on the flank. He was someone I was really looking forward to. He's got a good combination with those inside guys. And the other guy that he shut down was Jacob Morrison, who only had 56 run meters. And he ran around Morrison a fair few times too. Morrison is, he's still learning his craft. He was a rookie last season, but I see him as probably the future greatest centre, in my opinion. I have a high raps for Jacob, but Joey just showed him, it really was the experienced guy getting it up on the young gun. And then with Kane, he beat him in that battle by a long shot. Kane only had 63 run meters from 10 runs compared to Kelly's 198, of course, from 14. So they didn't have that many different runs, but Joey just always seemed to use those runs to perfection. It's just a really good performance from Joey. I think that I'm really surprised he's not playing fullback. I would have chucked him straight in that fullback jersey. Maybe they don't think he has the communication to be able to organise defensive lines at this stage in his career, but that's an interesting one, but we'll see what happens. As for New South Wales, I have to go, as New South Wales best player, I'm going to go my skipper, not my New South Wales skipper, but my Canberra Raiders skipper. It was Rahul Kaval. What a performance from him. He had 27 runs, 210 run meters, 11 tackles with 2 misses, and he even had a kick for 7 meters. Like, what can't he do? He was so great, and he only had 1 line break too, so it was all just tough runs. He was getting New South Wales out of trouble with every single run. he was just on another level. That's probably one of the best games I've seen him play in his entire career. So, he deserves a big rap for that. It was a really tough knock from him. And then the other guy that I want to talk about is, of course, Chaz Dingo. The kicking game from Isaac Edwards really kept him out of the game, but he still had 24 runs for 255 metres, which is absolutely enormous. So, full respect to Chaz, of course, 9 line breaks. He was still at his most damaging best. Unfortunately, he was let down by other aspects of the game. Maybe our kick pressure could have been better. In fact, it definitely should have been better to just, take it, because those kicks are, if you put kick pressure on, it makes that kick worse, and that makes Chaz's job way easier. And even Kane and Tyrone, who were on the wings there. So, we didn't really help them out with that as well, but it was just a typical Queensland performance. They were just way too good. And, yeah, that's all I have to say really about that game. So we'll get right into the preview. So I am, of course, recording this podcast on a Saturday morning. It is 12 p.m. These sides were released 2 hours ago. Let's have a look at both lineups. Let's start off with the Queenslanders for Game 2. Luka Moscow, he is the man to replace Liam Ryan at fullback. Liam, of course, suffered a neck injury, but he'll be right for Game 3. My mail says Zach Smith moves from the centres to the wing to partner Joey Kelly. Cherry Evans is still in the centres, but he moves from the right to the left. And, of course, Justin plays. A member of the leadership group. He took himself out. He didn't believe he was playing as good as Smith or Evans, but he is back. He is in that Queensland number 4 jersey. Isaac Edwards and Kyle Lewis will play in the halves. Luke Malchus and Jake Tuss are the 8 and the 10, but interestingly, they have changed from 8 to 10, if that makes sense. So Luke Malchus was 8 in Game 1. He's now 10 in Game 2. That could be a tactical switch, moving Luke to right side prop compared to the left. Samuel Atchison is the hooker as always. Jackson Allison, Liam Rogers in the second row. They were very solid. And Bo Sadler, the ever-reliable lock hooker, second row, whatever position he's in, he is always reliable. He is at 13 again. On the bench, Jack Spillane comes in for Jordan Lewis. Casey Namana, Cameron Relentless has been dropped for Jacob Reynolds in jumper number 16 and Rohan Kaval in jumper number 17. So, I finally vomited all that out. Let's talk about it. Lewis and Relentless are both dropped. I'm just going to get their game stats up now so that we can see how well they perform, because I definitely didn't really notice them as much as I would have liked. Of course, Jordan Lewis played 39 minutes. He only had 3 runs for 21 metres. That's not good enough in Origin, but he did make 10 tackles with no misses. He is a very solid defender, but he's usually a pretty good meter eater too. He has done that really well for us at Canberra. He might be more suited to starting, which of course he isn't going to be able to start in this Queensland side. So it's good that he got that experience, the young fella. He's going to be better off for it. And I definitely think that he will be in a State of Origin jersey again in the next 12 months. He will definitely get that jersey back again. Now, Relentless, he played 41 minutes, so very similar times to Lewis. He had 4 runs for 25 metres. He made 16 tackles, no misses, so a solid defensive outing for him. But again, I suppose they might just want a little bit more from their bench players. I'm still surprised, to be honest, that they dropped them. I definitely would have kept at least one of them. Jordan Lewis, biased. I'm, of course, really good mates with him. He's a really good kid. I would have kept Jordan Lewis in that side. Other than that, Luka Moscow at fullback is an interesting one. I probably would have gone for Joey Kelly back there just because he's a little bit more explosive, has a little bit more X factor, but Luka has been absolutely amazing for the Cowboys this season. So I definitely don't think that it's a bad move at all. Zach Smith goes to the wing. He always plays well, whatever position he is in. And I'm really excited to see Justin Plays get a crack at the Maroons centre jersey. It'll be interesting to see what happens when Liam Ryan gets back. If Justin performs well, do you drop Zach Smith or Cherry Evans and move Luka Moscow back so that Liam can come back? Or does Liam play off the bench with that neck injury? Who knows? Now we get into State of Origin Game 2's Blues lineup. Chaz Dingo is the fullback. Again, Tyrone Clay, Kane Chapman, Kenny have switched sides, but they are the wingers. Jacob Morrison and Isaac Simons are in the centres. Again, Jack O'Neill, partner Ash Crutcher in the halves, so Ash will get another crack at State of Origin. Matthew Harris and Luke Short are in the front row. That's an interesting change. Rahal Kaval and Jesse Bennett are in the second row. Jordan Williams at lock. And off the bench, Robbo Mobston comes in to make his State of Origin debut alongside Brad Goodwin. Mark Lee and Lachlan Martin are on the bench. So a couple interesting changes here. I'm going to talk about it like I have nothing to do with the side. I'm going to talk about it like I'm Paul Kent. Well, I'm not going to talk about it like him. I'm going to pick maybe a journalist with a bit more credibility. Anyway, so a couple interesting changes. Tyrone Clay and Kane Chapman-Kenny have switched sides. Joey Kelly is still on that right side, is he? Yes, so maybe they think Tyrone Clay will be able to shut him down a bit better than Kane did. Maybe they want to try and put Kane on Zach Smith, who is, of course, a bit inexperienced. Another change, Ash Crutcher. So there's no Brody Kennedy on the bench this time. He's been dropped. I don't think it was due to a poor performance. I think it was just that they can't fit him in there and they want to give Ash that full 80 minutes, which I'm really glad they've done that. I think that he deserves it. Another change, Jesse Bennett has moved to the second row. Luke Short comes from the bench to the starting side. That's an interesting one. I suppose that they're chucking him back in the position that he started his career at, Jesse, just for a bit of confidence. He played there in the Anzac Test, I believe, but I could be wrong. And then they've got Lockie Martin sitting on the bench, and I assume he might come on for Jesse, and then Jesse moves into a front row type of role, or maybe Lockie comes on at 13. But they've also got Mark Lee there, and I think that Mark played really well in that roaming ball-playing role, so he might come on at 13 for Jordan Williams as well. So there's a couple of... I think I like this side for Game 2 better for New South Wales overall. I think that I like Lockie Martin coming on a bit fresh. I like that Jesse Bennett's got that second row spot. I like him in the second row compared to a lot of people who do like him in the front row. Mark Lee keeps his spot, which is good to see too. And I think that Ash Crutcher deserved to keep his spot. It was an unhappy debut for the young fella, but I back him 100% to get back to winning ways for us. Who do I think is going to win this game? I mean, the way that Origin works, let's go off real life. New South Wales might win, but I am very worried about the Queenslanders. I think that they always put in these just 5-star performances, but it wasn't home, so they're not going to play at Suncorp again. I'll tip New South Wales simply out of bias, but it's State of Origin. It could go either way. That's my full State of Origin preview, guys. Now it is time for the agenda. Yes, welcome to the agenda. So if you don't know what this segment is going to be, basically I'm going to go through all the big stories of the SRL this week, and I'm going to talk about them, give my takes. So of course, if you've been in the league content area of the Discord, you will know that Commish has been dropping a bunch of around the league posts. I'm going to go through a couple of them, some positive, some negative. The first one, Joey Kelly on the move. Has this been the best start to Joey Kelly's career? Should he... he's probably been in the best form of his career, in my opinion, just about. He's probably Parramatta's most dangerous player at the moment, if I'm honest. Like, with Eli Barnes probably being shut down, teams doing a lot more homework on him. So should Joey move to fullback? Should they make that change? This is an interesting one because the captain makes the shot. He picks the team. He's the captain coach, right? And that's Eli Barnes. So it's up to Eli to move himself either into 5'8" or centre in exchange for Joey jumping in to fullback. I don't see it happening personally. I'd be interested to see it happen. I'd like to see Eli in a halves sort of role, but I don't see a world where Eli Barnes isn't the fullback for Para, simply because I think for Parramatta to be at their best, Eli has to be firing at fullback. That's how it's always been. That's what made them such a force to be reckoned with last season. Eli Barnes was breaking all sorts of records. It was an amazing season from him, but maybe they do have to make some sort of change, but I don't think it comes in that position. I think they need some stability in the halves, and then maybe they also then look for a bit of more of a mongrel in the back row. I think they are missing some depth in the back row, of course, with Kobe Johnston leaving the club last season. So that's my thoughts on that. at least. The next one, Mark Iron. He, of course, is reportedly on the outer at Canberra. Now, I'm, of course, a member of the Canberra leadership group, so I can give my 2 cents on this one. The question being asked by the media is, of course, is he the long-term fullback at Canberra? Is the long-term fullback at Canberra here right now? And then of course, with the Bunce rumours coming out that we'll get onto as well, then you can make the argument, is Bunce on his way to Canberra? I can confirm right now there's been no real discussion of Mark Iron leaving the club. We are committed to Mark. We want him to be at his best again like he was last season. He was the Behind the SRL Player of the Year alongside Eli, I believe it was. So I think that Mark is going to be the long-term Raiders fullback. I think he is wanted as long as he wants to be here. There were rumours in the off-season, of course, that he was going to go to South Sydney. If he wants to return to South Sydney, or if he wants to go and play for South Sydney, we're not going to hold Mark back because he obviously has a connection with that club, but we also want him at the club. We back him 100,000% to get back to his best. So that's my thoughts on the Mark Iron situation. Now let's get on to Buncey as we're getting into there. Of course, he's been good for the Warriors. He's probably been their best player so far this season. But does he want out? Is he a bit worn out from the Warriors? He's, of course, been named captain. He's been moved up into the captaincy. But where could he go? That's the real question. Who needs a fullback right now? I mean, maybe South Sydney could go for him if they wanted to move Liam back to the halves. But Canberra, if this Mark Iron stuff, like I've said it's not true. So we don't really have a need for Buncey either. So I don't really know where else he could land. Maybe he goes to a team like Brisbane, but they do have Sam Herban there. But what's he worth? That's the big one. The report was a club has offered him a big money deal. Is he worth big money? My answer to that is absolutely. He's a great leader, and he's an absolute superstar of the game. He will bring players. He will attract players. Playing with Chance Bunce is something that will attract players to the club. So I think for sure that Buncey is worth a lot of money. It's just whether or not he wants to leave New Zealand, leave the Warriors, and leave his, move his family, whether that means he has to leave without his family or if he has to move his whole family. That is really tough on Buncey. That's a tough decision. He's got a tough decision to make, but I see a lot of really good signs in the Warriors this year, so I think he'll stay. Another story now, committed Cambolo. Bunty is bound to the Cowboys. I love this. Bunty has been absolutely amazing. I think he'll re-sign long-term with the Cowboys this season. He's been awesome. He, of course, was playing pretty good in that New Zealand Origin game, but then he sort of slipped away a little bit when he had to move to fullback, which was unfortunate for him, but he's really proving to be a star of the future. I can confirm, as a Raider, I did shoot him a quick message and got into contact with him, but he is really committed to the Cowboys. So I think Chris Lord's gonna, he's done a great job, and I think he'll definitely offer him a little extension, a little upgrade, and extend him into the future. Liam Ryan, he's lost the goal kicking tee. Is this a bit of a media beater, or is it serious concerns? Is he on the outer at South Sydney? Is this the beginning of the end? I don't think it is. I think he's lost the tee because he's not goal kicking well at all, and I think they just want him to focus on his game, because I have goal kicked before, and I can tell you, it is distracting when you miss. It does distract you from the rest of the game because it changes your mentality a little bit. If you were down by 6 and now you're down by 2 because you missed the goal, that type of thing. So I think that this is just a way for Liam to get back to his best, and to just get a bit more confidence, I suppose. So I'm completely fine with this, and I don't think that it is a sign that he is going to leave the club or the club aren't happy with his performances or anything like that. And the last story we're going to go through today on the agenda, and this is a really interesting one. Prakash perplexed. He, of course, Lennox was left out of the entire New South Wales squad. He was pretty vocal about his disappointment. Should he feel hard done by? That's the big question. For me, no, I don't think he should. There are a couple of reasons why he was left out. I, of course, was involved in the decision. I'll put my hand up and say that it's not that I didn't want him in the side because I know what he can do, but he does go missing in games, and he's moved to the second row, and now he's playing a bit more consistently, and he's making bigger meters, but we looked for the best of the best forwards, and I think we got them. They didn't perform the way they wanted to. wanted to, but we've still got, you look at the second row, Rahal Kaval, Jesse Bennett, and then Lachlan Martin on the bench. He isn't going to take any of those guys out of that side. They are consistent first graders. So I think in the next 2 or 3 seasons, we could see Lennox making his State of Origin debut and maybe even becoming a full-time member of that squad, maybe even a leader, but he's also got to work on himself and his off-field issues. He, of course, had some misconduct, which didn't help him in selection, but I think that Lennox shouldn't feel hard done by, but he should use this as motivation to move forward and to lock up a jersey for the future. I think that he's definitely a rep player in the making, but he's got a lot of work to do on his game. So that's the agenda for this week. That is 6 stories from the SRL during the off-season, or the mid-season break, I'm sorry. Without further ado, let's head straight into our team's mid-season reviews. So for our mid-season reviews, guys, we're going to go through all 8 teams over the next 2 weeks. We're going to start off with the bottom 4 teams. So this is going to be a much more negative review, obviously. The top 4 teams are in much better form than a lot of these teams, which is disappointing, but we're going to get into it now. I think there's a lot of positives for all these sides too, though. It's a very even competition. So first up, the Penrith Panthers. They are, of course, languishing in 8th right now. They are yet to notch a win. They are 7th in defence, 8th in attack, and 8th in the SRL. So they're not having a good season. Let's not sugarcoat that. They aren't having a good season. They've had a couple games where I thought, oh yeah, I saw moments that I was like, wow, they can still be a force, but they're just letting themselves down with silly errors. I wish I had a stat to see who was leading the error count. I think Penrith would be right up there. Their first round game against the Warriors, they just threw the ball away. It was really disappointing. They just didn't put any pressure on them before they showed some really good signs. I did call the game against Manly. They showed some really good signs at times, but they just couldn't hang it with a really consistent first grade team, the champions. So I think that they learnt a lot from that. And then they went and played the Cowboys, and they lost 22-18, but they were really good. It was basically just, I'd say, a bit of luck to the Cowboys that got them through, but at the same time, the Cowboys were the better side. But they were by no means bad in that game, so they are building to something. So maybe this break isn't what they need, but at the same time, they can go through, they can get to their halves now, and they can talk to them, and they can build, and they can plan, and they can make a real strong case for the rest of the season. But we're going to talk about Fisher, Nathan Fisher. He's been playing good footy this year. He's been playing pretty solid. He's one of the more dangerous players. He steps down from captaincy. We don't really know why. I assume he just didn't have time for that much of a commitment anymore. And Lockie Martin's taking over. Lockie Martin's a real committed guy. He's really always around the SRL. So I think that it's definitely a good replacement. But, to have your captain stand down from captaincy mid-season is always a distraction for the side, so I don't know if that's weighing in on them at all. And the other big point is their halves. It's been a real struggle. James Thorne, Jack Cahill, Mark Lee, Declan Murphy, they've all played halves at some stage. Of course, Jack Cahill has now left the club. He's moved over to Brisbane, and for me, I don't think he was performing anyway, but they've made this really interesting change. They've moved James Thorne into hooker, and Mark Lee played halfback. Or 5/8? He played in the halves anyway. It would have been halfback. They've only played one game like that, and they challenged the Cowboys, who are a dark horse for the premiership. So maybe that's the way forward now. Maybe giving James Thorne a bit of a simpler role, getting him the ball when he needs it, and letting him, taking away that middleman, if that makes sense. So make sure the dummy half is always, he gives away clean possession, and that's all he's got to do. It's all he's got to focus on, getting the right players in the right position and executing that. And Mark Lee, he played that roaming ball player role in Origin, and he kicked a 40-20. He played great, so maybe that's the way forward from them from now on. Their MVP for me so far this season, Brody Kennedy. It's always Brody at the moment. He's slowly becoming, I wouldn't say that underrated fullback, the most underrated fullback in the game, but he might be, Tyler Amatagi is a guy that I think could be the most underrated fullback in the game, but he's so up there with just how underrated he is. He does so much good work for Penrith. I think that he's been above and beyond their best player. And now I've got to talk about their player that needs to stand up, and for me it's their new dummy half. It's James Thorne. He's their experienced player, and unfortunately he's struggled big time so far this season, performing for confidence, and he probably did dip in form towards the back end of last season too, Thorne, but I think that James is experienced, and he knows what he has to do to get himself back into peak performance, so I think that it'll be a really interesting second half of the season. Now, as for their priority target, for me, I think Liam Ryan's a guy that they could really go hard for. He'd take a lot of pressure off Brody Kennedy. That's another point to their attack. You'd sign him to play 5/8. He'd come in, and then you'd have either Mark Lee or James Thorne at halfback, and that takes a lot of pressure off Thorne and Lee as well. So yeah, that's sort of who I would prioritise if I was in the Panthers boardroom at the moment, and I think that I don't know who the Panthers have moved towards, but I think that he's the type of marquee signing that could get Penrith back on track. But I still think that they can make a run this season. I don't think it's the end for Penrith this season, but they need to do something quickly. They have to win all the rest of their games. It's as simple as that. If they don't win the rest of their games, they have no hope of making finals. I don't think they'll make finals because I just can't see them winning 5 games in a row, but I'd love to eat my words because I love a lot of the guys at Penrith. I have a good relationship with a lot of the Panthers players, so I really hope that they can turn this form slump around. But that's the Penrith Panthers. Let's move on now to the Brisbane Broncos. They are 8th in defence. They have the worst defence in the SRL, but they're 4th in attack, so their attack has been solid this season. They've had some really good attacking games. Of course, that game against the Cowboys is a prime example. I think they put on 30 points compared to 24 for the Cowboys, and then they're 7th in the SRL, so they're still second last. And on my notes here, I was thinking, what should I put? And there's only one real note that I have, and it's off-field dramas. Like, all I'm hearing out of Brisbane is, chatter-wise, is just negativity. It's player unrest, player dysfunction between players. There's been 2 strikes for misconduct for 2 real senior players in Jason Farah and in Lennox Prakash. There's been falling outs between certain members of a rookie class and the leadership group. In good clubs, rookies are not stepping up to leaders like that. It's really bad signs. I do think things have settled down now. With all that being said, I did just slam them. And I'd love to get Justin on the podcast. I'd love to get Justin Plays on here so we could talk and I could ask him about this type of stuff. But I think it has settled down. I'm still getting negative reports, but I'm also getting a lot of positive ones that they're talking through, and that's great. But we can keep on going on about these off-field issues. But the thing that, for me anyway, will get rid of all this chatter is winning games. They've only won 1 game this season. And even then, were they convincing? Not necessarily. They haven't had a convincing season. I do know as well that a player after round 1 against Manly did seek a release to go to Manly. Like they reached out to Manly through their management, which is disappointing. But I think that I think they can win some football games. They've got great players there. Sam Herban's an obvious one. He's flown under the radar this season. I think he's had a pretty alright season so far, but they're now chasing their tails a little bit. 1 win, of course, they're losing touch with that top 4. They need to get themselves back in a position to make that top 4. Of course, their last performance, 18-6 loss to Canberra. For me, that's their worst performance of the season. That was worse than the Manly game because they had a lot of ball and Canberra. I don't know if Canberra's defence was good. I play for Canberra, obviously, and I thought we did defend well, but I also just don't think that they threw a lot at us, so I think that they've really got to reshape how they attack a little bit, add a bit more structure. Pete Ferretto's been great. He's been trying his absolute guts out. I think getting a few plays around him, because he makes a lot of line breaks, a lot of good meters, they've got to use that. They've got to make some plays around him. He's, of course, moved into the lock as opposed to second row so far this season, and I think it's been a great change. But I think they do miss a mongrel forward, or just a real hard-working, consistent forward to add there to just take a bit of pressure off Pete. For me, their MVP, I was really struggling with this one. Pete Ferretto's an obvious one, and I think he probably has been their best player. I also have been pretty impressed with Coda Diab, but I've wrote down here Levi Raymond. He's had 5 assists, so he's probably been their best attacking player. But with that being said, I think that every player in that squad needs to stand up, including Jason Farah. He's moved to the club as a big marquee signing, and so far he's only notched 1 try assist for the Brisbane Broncos. So I think he needs to stand up. He needs to play a bit better. But so do the rest of the squad, if I'm honest. No one in that squad is really sticking out to me as having a breakout season, unfortunately. So it's been a really, really, really tough few weeks for the Broncos, but they can get out of this. They can push through. They can get back there. They build off their attack. If they can fix up their defense, they'll be fine, because even though they didn't throw a lot at us in Canberra last week, or last round of the SRL before we closed, they're still 4th in attack. Their attack's great. They've had some really good attacking moments, so if they could sort out their defense, all of a sudden, if they could go 4th in defense and 4th in attack for the rest of the season, I reckon they could make finals and make a really good push for the premiership, but they've just got to sort out their defense and their off-field issues. As soon as that gets sorted out and they start winning, we're not going to talk about off-field dramas between players. We're going to talk about the revival of Brisbane. But right now, it's just not happening. So for me, their priority target, I know that I was talking about him struggling in Origin a little bit, but he's still one of the best forwards in the game. For me, Jesse Bennett, they need just another consistent forward who's going to work hard, who's going to not miss any or very few tackles, and who's going to inspire his troops, and that's Jesse all over. He's a great leader. Do I see Brisbane finishing in the finals this season? I think their attack's great. And their attack is giving me hope that they can push for a final spot, but geez, they need to find some form soon, because if they don't, they're not going to be able to play final. They're going to miss the finals again for the second season running, and that's not good enough, especially for a side with so much success in season 1. The Parramatta Eels, 6th in defense, 7th in attack. They're 6th in the SRL. I don't really know what's going on there, in the sense they've still got a couple really good players. Joey Kelly's gone over there. He's probably been their best player for me. But they still got Tim James, still got Eli, but I think Eli's been shut down tremendously in every single game. Teams are doing their homework on him for sure. So I think that I haven't seen any frustration in his game yet, though. He's not pushing passes. He's still very composed like he always is, which is good to see. But I think we need to see a little bit more from him, because if he's not playing well, unfortunately the team doesn't play well. It's a bit, I wouldn't say that he carries the team, but he definitely plays a big role in their best and worst performances. They did notch a win against the Warriors last week. It was their first win of the season. They won 14-12. They showed some really good signs in that game, but again, it's still Eli Barnes. He gets jammed every run. They're kicking it exactly in the right places. So it's disappointing for Eli so far this season, but I think that Para can really turn this around. Attila Sentendag, he was probably, I would say, the best forward, in one of the best second rows in the game last season. But so far this season, he hasn't really lived up to it. He was included in the Origin squad, but his form probably did make him miss out on a spot in the actual team. I think that going off last year's form, he probably would have been in the team this season. So it's a bit disappointing for him. But we look at their MVP. I'm going to get some positives. I'm going to talk positive. Tim James, he's always consistent. He always makes his tackles. He's always dangerous out of dummy half. And I put Joey Kelly as their new signing. He's made a really good impact. I think culturally he's been great, because he is a good leader. He, of course, was captain at Brisbane. So I think that they've got a lot of positive there. Can they make finals? I think yes. I think they still can make it. 100%. Eli Barnes can turn it on out of nowhere. Joey Kelly's already playing good footy. Tim James loves playing off the back of off of Eli. I just think their forwards have to play a bit better. Luke Short probably needs to stand up a little bit too. Samuel Lillard's a new signing, and he's a great forward. Canberra are really missing him. I think he could probably do a little bit more. They're missing Kobe Johnston, their former captain. He provided so much consistency on the edge. But I think they're really missing, I wouldn't say a superstar half, but just a solid half, just a consistent half that you know you're going to get from him each and every week. Unfortunately, Jaden White is just struggling a little bit this season. So I would go for their priority target. I would go for a guy whether it's Rahan Taval or Joshua Butterfield. That's the two guys I've got. Just guys that aren't superstars by any means. Rahan is obviously a bench player for Queensland, but they're just consistent. You know what you're going to get from them. They're going to kick well. They're going to make their tackles, and they're going to get you into the right field position. So I would probably prefer Joshua just because he's at that Manly system, and we've seen just how greatly he's improved in his overall management of a team. So, like I said, I think that Parramatta can make the finals. Will they make the finals? I don't know, but I definitely am confident that if they made it, I wouldn't be surprised. If they went on a run right now for the rest of the season, I would go, yeah, that checks out. That's Para. They've got a really good squad. So they've had a disappointing start to the season. Of course, they're 6th in the SRL, but they're only 2 spots away from 4th. So they've got a lot to build on. I'm sure they can build on this season and keep moving forward, keep improving. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if I saw them playing finals footy in Season 3. Now, the Auckland Warriors, they will be the last team I talk about this week. And I'm looking at their stats. They're just not quite getting the results, but they are trying their guts out. They are 2nd in defence behind only Manly, who are undefeated, and they're 5th in attack. And they're 5th in the SRL. So their attack isn't bad by any means. It probably has let them down a little bit at times, but their defence has been amazing. Their last performance was a 14-2 loss to the Warriors, to the Parramatta Eels. I apologise. So I've got to be honest. I can honestly see the Warriors making a push to finals. They're working hard, trying hard. They're just not quite getting the results. But their attack can improve a little bit. If they improve their attack, the defense is already exceptional. They can make a push for the finals. I'll just get the ladder up here. And while I do, I'll talk a little bit about the MVPs. For me, Chance Bunce is a guy that I'm really high on, obviously. And I think he's probably been just about their best player. But the Corcoran brothers, Joshua's been really solid, but for me, Patrick Corcoran's having another great season. I think he's unlucky to have missed out on State of Origin selection for Game 1 and also Game 2. I think that we could definitely see him in Game 3, though, so they're my top performers. I think standing up-wise, John Nanai, in no disrespect to him, he's only averaging 94 run meters so far this season. I think Johnny Nanai probably does need to stand up a little bit. If he just ups that a little bit, gets them moving forward, it's going to do heaps for their attack. If John can get them in good field position and keep the opponents in their own end. As for a priority target, well, Chance Bunce leaves the club. Chaz Dingo, boom, replaced one of the best fullbacks in the game, one of the best fullbacks in the game. It's pretty much that simple, whereas I think that if not, they were reportedly very interested in Will Kay, and I think that they should try hard to get him again. He's playing off the bench at the moment. Try and get him to come into the halves. I think they're going to lose both McGelly and Ashford next season. I think they have let go of one of them, though, for inactivity. So I think that Will Kay's the perfect guy to bring into that squad. Whether or not he wants to make the move to New Zealand is the question. Can I see the Warriors playing finals this year? Absolutely. I think that they're my surprise packet. I think if they can just sort out their attack, score a few more points, then, the sky is the limit with them. They're 5th in the SRL, but they are only 1 win outside of the 8, and they have better for and against in Canberra, who are 4th, and they're only 6 points away on for and against than South Sydney, who are 3rd, and then 2nd even the Cowboys are on 4 points as well, compared to the Warriors who are only on 2, but just a few wins, and all of a sudden they could challenge for that 2nd place. I don't think anyone's going to track down Manly, but we'll talk about them a little bit more in the mid-season reviews for the top 4 teams currently in the SRL competition. But that's all we're going to have time for on the Be The Player podcast today. Obviously, I'm still figuring this podcasting thing out. It's definitely going to up quality as time goes on. Definitely going to improve my confidence as time goes on. So just bear with me throughout all of this. I'm really looking forward to getting some people to jump onto interviews or a bit of co-hosting, a bit of analysis with me. That'll be awesome. And I want to know from you guys, what do you want to see next week and into the future? Other ideas for this, just hit me with them, guys. Like anything, feedback, just give it all to me so we can improve this podcast, so we can have a really good SRL community podcast. That's all for me. I look forward to next week. I will see you in the next podcast. See you later.